That's why that division. After the Revolutionary War was over, and over a period of years, the two reunited. Okay, but in the U.S. it's generally called the Episcopal Church, and in the British areas of the world, it's Anglican. So in Africa, you'll have both Anglican and Episcopal, um, even though it's kind of all under one heading, until there are divisions, and we'll talk about those there. So, bottom line is, in most places where the British Empire existed, you have the Anglican or the Anglican Episcopal churches. Uh, so under that, there's 85 million in 164 countries around the world. All right. Um, so that's the Anglican Episcopal. We'll talk more about the divisions of those later on. Another very large organization is the Assembly of God. The Assembly of God is the largest of the Pentecostal movement. The Pentecostal movement has grown dramatically. Um, the Pentecostal movement began at the end of the 1800s. Okay, it has now surpassed every other um, Protestant denomination, and it is a branch off from the Anglicans, but most people don't consider it Anglican. As we don't consider many other of the branches, the early branches that split off from the Anglican Church as Anglican. All right, so Pentecostals, 280 million. It said the 67 million of those are in the Assemblies of God, which is one of the fastest growing denominations in the world. Okay, the Baptists, they have them listed on our sheet as 90 million plus. Now again, remember this. This is a good 10 to 12 years old. This sheet that I'm showing you. So anyway, 90 million plus Baptists. Again, Baptists are a growing movement as well. The Baptists go back considerably farther than Pentecostals, dating back to the early 1600s, and they they have split into a tremendous number of different denominations around the world, especially here in America. We'll cover that in more detail in a little bit as well. All right. So a third of all Baptists live here in America, and then we have them, as I said, they're spreading around to other places. In the former USSR, the Baptists comprised the largest of the Protestant denominations, which is interesting. In Russia and the Russian provinces, they you're either Baptist or you're Pentecostal. Okay, in terms of Protestant, that's pretty much. Now they do have some of the cults. The Jehovah's Witnesses are there, but in terms of Protestant churches, it's pretty much you're one or the other. In and you may not even know what that means, but you're either Baptist or Pentecostal. Okay, another of the large denominations. Did you need a sheet? Okay, is the Lutherans. Lutherans named after Martin Luther, and the Lutherans began in Germany. That was the beginning of the Protestant Reformation in 1517, and the Lutherans have expanded again around the world. There's in the United States, they're not that large in comparison to some of the other denominations, but they are particularly in two areas. Um, it says on the sheet 36 million Lutherans live in Europe. That is primarily in Germany and in the Scandinavian countries. Scandinavian countries converted to Lutheranism in the 1600s and 16 and 1700s. So we're talking Denmark, Finland, Norway, Sweden, and Iceland. All right, so that's where the majority of them exist. And the Lutherans have expanded into Africa and then into Asia a little bit and Latin America. One of the reasons that some of the others, for instance, the Anglicans, are in more countries is because basically the Germans didn't have an empire in that sense. Okay, so it's only as missions have become important to Protestants that some of these countries are now sending out missionaries. Okay, we have the Methodists. The Methodists are actually a split from the Anglican Church. John and Charles Wesley themselves were Anglicans. They, in a sense, considered themselves Anglicans all the way up until their death. But shortly after they died, the Methodist Church completed the split from the Anglican Church. So it's a major branch that splits off from the Anglican Church, and would be where the Anglican Church would not necessarily be considered a Protestant church. The Methodist Church is definitely a Protestant church. The main reason for the split with the Anglican Church was that the Anglican Church excommunicated, in a sense, the Methodists because of their theology, but also their practice. Because the Anglican Church was completely under the rulership of the king, and the Methodists said, no, we're under King Jesus, not under the king. So there's a whole lot more. I'm just giving you the brief analysis of these things. Presbyterians, and this is the Presbyterians are the largest of the Reformed denominations. Okay, when we talk about Reformed denominations, we're talking primarily about those that use that title or came directly from the European Reformed churches. Okay, so many of the Reformed denominations are European and European based. Most of those are liberal in their theology, especially those that have remained over in the in Europe. Okay, so the Presbyterians they started really from John Calvin and Farel, who was kind of Calvin's, I can't really call him Calvin's mentor, but he's the one that recruited Calvin to Geneva to teach and instruct. And while the western part of Switzerland, which is where Geneva is, was French speaking, and that's the western and the northern, which is the German speaking cantons in Switzerland. Eventually they merged together. The followers of Zwingli and the followers of Calvin merged together, and then out of this came a guy named John Knox, who took he was Scottish. He took the teachings of Calvin to Scotland. Scotland converted to the Presbyterian doctrines, and from there it spread much more so than from Switzerland. All right, so 75 million Presbyterians. The Calvinists reformed 85 million. All right. Okay, so and then the Roman Catholic Church, of course, we've talked before about the Orthodox churches. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a little bit. But you had the Roman Catholic Church split from, which is the Western Church, split from the Orthodox Church, or the Greek Church. At first, it was just because of the empire in the end of the 4th century, beginning of the 5th century. Eventually, it began to split more over doctrine and over the fact that the Western Bishop of Rome began to think that he was the head of the church. And of course, the patriarch in Constantinople, as well as the bishops in Alexandria and Jerusalem and Antioch, were not real happy with that. Okay, so in Eastern Orthodox, the Greek Orthodox Church, the patriarch is not considered a pope. The patriarch, who is in Constantinople, which is now Istanbul, the patriarch is first amongst equals. Okay, so all the bishops then in these larger communities are considered, in a sense, equal, which is not true of Rome, where you have the Pope as the divine representation of God's glory on earth. Okay, so but the Roman Catholic Church is larger than any other quote Christian group, with about 1.25 billion people. So altogether, there's about 2.6 or 2.7 billion Christians in the world. Islam is rapidly catching up. Last time I knew, it was about 2.3 billion, Muslims in the world. So part of the reason that Christianity is shrinking, I mean, it's not really shrinking, but it's not growing like it used to, is because of the influence of the Western view of having children. Okay, so the Muslims have no problem having children, and so they grow more rapidly. And in the Western world, we're down to something like 1.8 children, per couple, which means that you're having less people to replace those that were there. Okay, so anyway, the Roman Catholic is it's the majority religion in Italy, Spain, Latin America, and it is the largest single group in the United States right now, about 25% in the United States. Just a comment on the Baptists, which we talked about, 90 million plus. In the United States, there are 65 Baptist denominations. Okay, 65 listed Baptist denominations. That's not including some independent, non-affiliated Baptist church, like this church was for years. Okay, we were a non-affiliated Baptist church from about 1982 to 2007. Okay, so again, not counting those, there are 65 denominations, but 90% belong to 5 five specific denominations, the largest of which is the Southern Baptist. The Southern Baptist Convention has about 16 million members in the United States, and so they're the largest Protestant denomination in the United States of America. There's also the National Baptist USA, National Baptist Convention USA. The National Baptist Convention USA has about 5 million members. It is an African American primarily, though they have opened their doors to other ethnicities. It's still primarily an African American, but it's conservative. There's also the National Baptist Convention of America, which has about 3.5 million. Obviously, if you think and you hear those two names, you'll realize that they split. But both of them are considered conservative. No, I'm sorry. The National Baptist of America aligns more with the Progressive Baptists. Again, these are African Americans, and the Progressive Baptist is liberal. So the National Baptist Convention of America would be considered mid to liberal, where the National Baptist Convention USA, the larger one, is considered conservative to middle. Okay. And then there's the Baptist Bible Fellowship, which is made up primarily of the fundamentalist Baptist churches, about 1.2 million of them. And then the American Baptist Churches USA, which used to be the Northern Baptist, they have been hemorrhaging members over the past 20, 30 years. Most of the smaller denominations that are conservative have split off from the Northern or American Baptists because of their liberal theology. Okay, so we'll look at more of those things. If you flip that page over, there's denominations worldwide. Just different people have different branches, way they branch things off. So these are here in alphabetical order. So the Adventist family, okay, this would include the Seventh-day Adventists and other groups like that. The Jehovah's Witnesses came out of the Adventist movement. British Israelism came out of the Adventist movement. So those kinds of groups. So not all of them are heretical, but the main Seventh-day Adventist would be considered a heretical group. Certainly Jehovah's Witnesses, British Israelism, those are considered heretical. There are some Seventh-day Adventist churches that would be considered evangelical, but it's mostly small branches of them. No, they're heretical because of their theology, or for instance, the main Seventh-day Adventist follows Ellen White, who was into Spiritism and those kind of things. So. Then the Baptist families, we talked about the Southern Baptist, the American Baptist, the National Baptist Convention, and of USA and of America. So That's another branch. The Christian Science, again, we're looking at these because they have the name Christian, or they somehow align themselves with the name Christian. But that Christian Science, that's part of the metaphysical spiritism type of things. So the New Age movement, the New Thought, the Metaphysical Family Christian Science, and the Philosophic Society, all of those are, again, these just simply come out of this, view of sort of Eastern mysticism westernized, would be sort of the way to describe those. And then there's the communal family. The Jesus people, there are not many of those left that live in communes, but during the 1970s, there were a lot of Christian communes, okay? And so, they lived in these communities of Christians, and everybody shared everything together, but most of them were solid, evangelical, but most, again, there's still some of those around. You would also have in that the bad branches, for instance, the Waco groups, some of these militia groups that call themselves Christian groups, but they're militia groups. Jim Jones, the one that took his group down, and then they all committed mass suicide. Those could be considered part of this communal style of living as well. The Eastern Orthodox, we've talked about that. We'll mention that again in a few minutes. European Free, these are groups. Some of them are communal. For instance, the Hussites, the Amish, which we're familiar with here in the United States. Some of the Mennonites, not many of them, but some branches of the Mennonite community as well. Okay, and then you have others that aren't so much communal, but come out of this, the pietistic movement really is where all of these have come from. Pietism being the focus on the inner light that God gives to us, more so than emphasis on the scriptures. So if you attend some of these meetings, the people would sit there until they got some kind of a word or whatever, and then they would speak it. It might be biblical, it might not be biblical. Okay, so that's the free church groups there. Then the holiness. Okay, and again, as I was telling Monica, the holiness movement came out of the Methodist movement, which came out of the Anglican movement, but certainly most of them would not necessarily think of themselves as being Anglican. So the holiness movement, there are lots of these. I've just listed a couple of the more well-known ones: Christian Missionary Alliance, the Church of the Nazarene, but there's the Wesleyan, which used to be Wesleyan Methodist. There's the Free Methodist and other groups like that. And okay, so basically the holiness individual, these denominations, their primary emphasis is on this second work of grace called sanctification, that you can be perfected up to what you know. Okay, so they don't claim absolute perfection, but up to what you know, where you can walk without sinning in the areas that you know. So that's the holiness movement. And then you have the independent fundamental, and we talked about the Baptist Bible Fellowship. That would be considered part of this movement, the Plymouth Brethren as well. And so these are are groups that, for instance, the Plymouth Brethren was the group from which the dispensationalism came. And dispensationalism has gone into the fundamentalist movement primarily, but other areas as well. So that's the independent fundamentalists. And again, these would be more contemporary rather than historic. What we were looking at before was historic. What we're looking at now, these are more contemporary ways of listing these groups out. And of course, then the Latter-day Saints, which is the Latter-day Saints in Utah and their branch. Then there's the Restorationist Church of Jesus Christ of the Latter-day Saints, which it was the second branch that split off from the main group. This was very early on. And we talked about, I think we did, sending missionaries actually to Utah to try to convert the people in Utah to the real Church of Jesus Christ of the Latter-day Saints. And then it has, in the 1940s, it started shifting more towards a Protestant and sort of evangelical perspective. I'm not sure that I would encourage anybody to attend one of their churches, but any more than I would the Seventh-day Adventists, even the more biblical ones there. All right, Lutheran. We talked about the Lutheran family. In the U.S., the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America is the largest of the Lutherans. It is very liberal. All right, and so then you have the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod. That's the conservative branch of the Lutherans. And then there are a bunch of other smaller groups, some of them liberal, some of them conservative. Messianic Judaism, okay, a growing movement. So you have Jews for Jesus, you have the Chosen Peoples group, and then other branches of that. The Jews for Jesus being the largest of them in the United States. But again, there's a variety of different groups that are out there. We talked about the Pentecostal, with the Assemblies of God being the largest, the Church of God Cleveland, the Church of God, I think it's St. Louis. So there's a number of branches there of the Pentecostal movement that have, they're not quite as bad as the Baptists, but almost as many denominations of Pentecostal groups. And then, of course, underneath that would be the charismatic groups. A lot of the charismatic groups would not consider themselves denominations because of the way, but they are. Okay, so if you look at the Hillsong, for instance, okay, they're all attached to the original Hillsong, so that in a sense that makes them a denomination, even though they consider themselves non-denominational. Technically, once you start planting these groups and they're tied together and under an organization, that makes them a denomination. All right, and then you have the Pietist, okay, and in this particular thing, they've connected the Methodists with the Pietist movement. I would kind of, well, it's true because the Pietist movement did affect the Methodist movement, which grew out of the Wesley brothers and expanded from there. Okay, so the Scandinavian Pietism. The Pietism came basically out of Germany. It originated in Germany, and then expanded there to, and again, it's that view of the inner light. within, and that's where they went off into what we talked about, up above. If they remained true to the scriptures, then that moved more to the holiness movement, more to the Methodist. And then the United Methodist Church, largest of the Methodist churches or denominations in the United States, fully liberal in its theology and in its practice. All right. And then you have the smaller groups, the Free Methodists and other Methodist groups. And the Free Methodists are a conservative group from the Methodists. And again, the holiness and the Methodists are interrelated because the holiness movement came out of the Methodist movement, the conservative end. So most of what we have in Pentecostalism and in the holiness churches, they were split off from the Methodist Church because of the liberalism within the Methodist Church. And then once you get one split, then you tend to get other splits, and it just morphs out that way. And then, again, we talked about the Reformed and the Presbyterian. We have three main groups of Presbyterians. Okay, so you have the Presbyterian Church USA, and the Presbyterian Church USA is the liberal branch. Then you have the Orthodox Presbyterian Church, which split in the 1930s from the what was just then the Presbyterian Church over the conservative, and so it's the conservative. That's why it's called Orthodox. And then you have the Presbyterian Church of America, the PCA. And the PCA is the Orthodox, split from the Orthodox Presbyterians over the issue of becoming more contemporary, in a sense. Okay, the Orthodox Presbyterian stayed very more rigid, held to the more of the Old Testament law things, like Sabbath worship and those kind of things. So the Presbyterian Church of America, the PCA, wanted more contemporary music, less of the legal side of things. So those are there are other Presbyterian groups, but those are the three main branches within the Presbyterians. And then the Western liturgical family of the Anglican Communion, the Roman Catholics, the Orthodox, all of those different groups that you have listed there. Those are varieties that are split off from either the Roman Catholic Church, the Russian Orthodox Church, or the Greek Orthodox Church. Okay, so that gives you sort of a more contemporary view of the, at least in the United States, but around the world as well. Okay, so now going into even more detail here. What I've done is, what I want us to see is when the Protestants get this, bad name, rightfully so, I think, of just being schismatic. We're constantly dividing, as if the other groups don't. Okay, so what I'm showing here, and believe me, these are small amounts of the break-offs from these other groups. So we have there the Eastern Orthodox Church, which is the Greek Orthodox Church. Okay, that's the main group. Okay, but you also have the Oriental Orthodox Communion, and these groups that are underneath. So they have split They split ages ago from the Roman Catholic or from the Orthodox, the Greek Orthodox Church, and different groups. They all split off. Now those groups they have not united, but they're in communion with one another. Okay, and so these are still there today, and are and within all these groups, there are breaks. Okay, so all I'm showing you is, let's not hear that it's the Protestants that are the ones that are breaking up. Yes, we have done it incredibly, but these other groups. So probably within the Eastern Orthodox, there's probably something like 30 to 40 different branches, and I'm not talking about like in the United States. You would have the United States Orthodox Church, but it's underneath the Greek Orthodox Church, okay? And we consider the patriarch as sort of the head of the church, okay? So I'm not talking about different countries, because different countries have their own organizations, but are they fully under? All right, I'm talking about ones that have actually split off from and are not underneath the patriarch or related to the Oriental Orthodox communions. They've split off from them as well. All right. So what I've been able to garner looking at worldwide, I'd say there's somewhere between 30 and 40 that are formerly part of the Greek Orthodox, but have divided off. Same thing within the Russian Orthodox. The Russian Orthodox Church, there's one that I didn't put on there, which is the old Russian Orthodox Church, which should be on there. Anyway, so these are, again, divisions off of the Russian Orthodox Church. Back in the 1800s, there was a major split within the Russian Orthodox Church, and what they call it? The Old Catholic is what it was called. The Old Catholic Church, and Catholic there being universal, not Roman Catholic. All right, so that was a split off of the Orthodox. So you can see here are other ones. These a lot of these have split more recently because of the Russian Orthodox Church. After the wall came down and after the breakup of the USSR, the Russian Orthodox Church was sort of independent of the government. But more recently, especially after Putin took charge, the Russian Orthodox Church has now, in a sense, merged with the government again. And as a result of that, many of the national churches that were from the Russian Orthodox but are no longer, but are in a different country, have separated themselves and said we're no longer under the patriarch of the Russian Orthodox Church. And so so you have a list of just some of them there, and then the Old Catholic Church should be added to that. That's why the G is there, but I failed to type that in there. Okay, so and then within Roman Catholicism, I hate to say it, but the Roman Catholic Church is divided so many times. It's hard to believe. But remember, I talked about the Celtic Church being separate from the Roman Catholic Church, but then forced underneath by the sword, basically. So that goes back from the 5th century to the 8th century. They were separated, but I don't have that here because they no longer exist. But that the American Catholic Church in the United States is not the Roman Catholic Church in the United States. Okay, they have separated themselves off. The American National Catholic Church, again, separated itself off. The Liberal Catholic Church, these are churches that would still, to a certain extent, claim to be under the Roman Catholic Church, but have united themselves in opposition to the more conservative aspects of the Roman Catholic Church. Okay, so they would ordain women. They would participate with the LGBTQ communities, things like that. Okay, and so the Roman Catholic Church, some of them have been excommunicated from the Roman Catholic Church. Others are affiliated with the Roman Catholic Church by name, but follow these other tenets. Okay, and then of course you have Rome itself, the St. Louis, Missouri group. It's not a large group, but it's a split off there, and then the True Catholic Church, which said that the Catholic Church has gone off. And again, these are not large groups, but they are splits. But if you think about it, within Rome, some of you have come out of the Roman Catholic Church or you're familiar with it, and you have the Franciscans, you have the Jesuits, you have the Benedictines, you have all these groups within the Roman Church, which are in opposition to one another. So we can call ourselves Protestants just because we don't have this head guy, up there. So, we all call ourselves Protestants, but we have we denominate differently. Well, that's true within the Roman Catholic Church. They have many different branches within the Roman Catholic Church, which would not agree with other groups, have a different vision, a different purpose, but because they still have the Pope, they're considered part of the Roman Catholic Church. Okay, so I didn't list those out here, but I would consider those denominations within the Roman Catholic Church because they have their own rules, their own regulations, their own goals, their own visions, all of those kind of things. Even to which ones, which saints they hold to, or whether they even hold to saints. There are some that don't. So each group has its own view, and I would consider those denominations. And if we look at that, we're probably talking more in the somewhere between 60 and 100 different denominations within Roman Catholicism, which makes them worse than the Baptist. Okay. Anglican Church, and again, this is still under the Anglican Episcopal branch, okay? But again, these are ones that no longer consider themselves part of. They still retain the name, but they don't consider themselves under the authority, particularly of the Anglican Church in England, or the affiliated Episcopal Church. Okay, so you have again on this long thing of conservative to liberal. You have different groups that have split off because of disagreements over the LGBTQ or women's ordination, or those kinds of things. And so these different groups have split off from those, some more conservative, some less conservative there. So that takes us up through the Anglican. We're going to have to call it quits at this point. So we'll pick up the other two sheets and look at those as we get into the more Protestant churches next week. So if you can remember to bring your sheets back with you. All right, let's pray. Father, I thank you for this chance for us. It amazes me that we call ourselves Christians, and we can have so many different ways of looking at what that means. From what many of us would consider heretical, unbiblical, truly not Christian at all, to those things that where we would fellowship together, but denominate differently. We continue to pray, however, that the words of Jesus in John 17, that his prayer, that we would be one, even as you and Father and our Lord Jesus Christ are one, that we would be one. And I pray that you would help us to figure out in the years to come how to do that. We ask it in Jesus' name. Amen.